down, turn your microphones on. I don't want this doesn't need to be an all-night thing. It's just to get it, it's one of the topics we have to cover for policy governance, so I wanted to get it more organized. So, I have an agenda here, Randy gave me somewhere. Call to order at 5:04. This is a work session to discuss township committees, Marquette Township Board, June 7th, 2018. It's Thursday night. You want to do a roll call then?
Okay, Trustee LaRue is absent and excused. Trustee Wiegand. Here. Trustee Everson.
Here.
Trustee Marks.
Present.
Treasurer Johnson.
Yes.
Clerk Rattari is here, and Supervisor Durant.
Yes.
No staff present. We do have a committee member, Mike Springer is here, and he's on the planning, recreation, and road.
You have any comment? Anything you want to talk about? Just listening? That's okay. Just want to make sure. Okay, let's get into it. Excuse me. I gave you a little worksheet, and you can get a copy of this, Mike, if you want, after. These are some of the things that come into play with committees, and some of the recommendations I'm making. What I'd like to do is have, and I'm thinking forward too, for new board members. I'd like to have some kind of a little binder or something that has the bylaws of the committees that we work with. And I almost put it together, and then I thought I had asked Dave and Dan, excuse me, if they got anything when they came on board, and Dave said that he got bylaws of the committees he's on. Did you get anything, Dan? Nothing, okay. So that's what I'd like to have, is to have all the board members have some kind of a little book. If we want to go as far as, you know, the board of review and all that, we can. So I didn't do anything because I didn't want to put a bunch of stuff together that you might already have. But I do have a book of my own that has planning, roads, ZBA, board of review, DDA. It's got all the bylaws in there, so, and I've got some notes in here. I use it as a workbook when I know I'm going to be messing with these committees. And if there's going to be changes, I've got highlights in here and everything. So I'd like to put something together for you, if you don't mind. I'm not really asking you, I'm telling you I'd like to do that. And then you can pass it on.
Absolutely.
Now, in the election committee, which is not, that's actually a statutory committee, there's really no bylaws for that because it's governed by statute. And all that the committee does is basically approve the election workers. They do deal with precincts if we are going to move them or, you know, change the precincts. And basically that's about it. So I'm the chair of that one, and that's a standing board committee that has to be filled every 4 years. So, but there will be no bylaws with that one.
Right.
You know, that's statutory, and maybe we could print that out. I could print that out, the statute on that, and that would be basically your bylaws for that.
Okay, that would probably be good.
The ZBA is covered by legislative.
Statute, yep.
So there wouldn't be any bylaws there.
Well, there kind of is. I mean, it talks about, it's just a couple pages, actually. But it does give you an idea of the duties and responsibilities. So it explains the committee a little bit.
They're somewhat covered in the ordinance, but it's basically, it follows the state law.
This just talks about the duties and what to do with resignations, vacancies. It gives you an idea of how the board operates. So, you know, for the people who don't deal with it very much, it gives them a little more information on how it functions. So, second thing, and the thing I want to try to impress the most, and that's one of the reasons I was anxious to do this, is to talk about the protocols and who responds to whom, how people are notified, who they report to. It's that chain of command, and Susan talked a little bit about this in our training with her. But it's real easy for committees to get away from who they report to. And that's the second part on here, is how it stands. And you'll see that I split up planning, rec, and roads, because those are our basic committees that we use to function. The personnel, safety, and community events are different. And that's why I didn't even put ZBA and stuff on here, because that's not really, we don't have a lot of control over that stuff. These are the ones we kind of, I don't even want to say control, because personnel has to do with the contract a little bit. It's a little bit different. The safety committee, it's the same thing. But I put them on here because they're active committees. So the purpose of this is to reiterate who reports to whom, and why that's important is obviously that chain of command. And we've started doing it a little bit more recently because we've had issues, realizing that there are amendments, like the text amendment stuff, the process of it's got to go back to planning, or it's got to go to the board, how many readings and all that stuff. That's real important for us to adhere to. So I just gave you just a rough idea who reports to who on here, and not to, and I think the other reason I'm thinking of this is I had a resident tell me the other day that one of our board members, she approached one of our board members about an issue in the township. And the board member said, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." And I thought, oh, okay, we can't do that. It's got to go to Randy. If it's a board issue, he'll bring it to us. But we can't take any of that kind of initiative, because once we walk out that door, we're just Lynn Durant, that's it. You're not the board. So I just wanted to reiterate that.
Pardon me for
That's okay.
interrupting, but at a beginning of each of these, you might want to say who has the authority to appoint and whatnot. That might be another item to add. I think it's important. Sometimes there's board support required, sometimes it's not. So that could be a beginning on each.
Well, and some of that is
that in there?
kind of in here, yeah. We
Okay.
can, but that's a good point to make. So, number 2 is the protocols. I'm just leaving that pretty much. It's more for information than anything else. But I put a lot of lines on here in case you guys want to make notes.
I think the community events, that's not really a contract, that's for the manager, basically, correct?
Yeah, actually Randy qualified all 3 of these involving the contract, but
Okay, I would say manager, because that's who they really,
yeah,
it's go-to for things, and then he relays it to us.
okay, that seems reasonable. I'll check with him, because we were going over this really quickly the other night, and see what his reasoning was for that. The next one is changing term expirations. There aren't too many, there's only a couple, and I did email Carol Fulsher and asked her if she knew for sure if the Heritage Trail had to be in the middle of the year. It's March and April in here, and I'd really like to, with your permission, push all these that are oddballs to the end of the year and have all the committees expire in December. The only exception to that would be ours, because it's in November of the year that we turn over.
And also the election committee ends at that same time,
Yeah.
because it's board members, yeah.
Yep. And there is, if they're fulfilling a term, that's a little bit different, but there's a few on here, like even on the DDA, the term is May, and I think that's because it was supposed to be a fulfillment, but I'd just like to have them all be more uniform. And I'll have to check on wastewater to see if, because that's an authority, or
Advisory
not a-
board.
Yeah, I was just gonna correct myself there. Wastewater treatment, and then find out if we can change that. We don't have a lot of control over that, so we may not. We don't really have any control, and that's a different term. So, even community events, Barb Wiegand's got a May renewal date for this year, so that's why before I did anything with these, I wanted to have this meeting so we can get this all straightened away once and for all.
Yeah, I think you could next meeting have an agenda item where you uniform these committees that we can control.
Yep, that's what I was kind of hoping.
To push those appointments to the end of the year, and probably if you could stagger some terms also.
Some of them should be, you'll
Yeah, I think
notice
the
that-
most part they are, so I don't think that's a problem, but,
Yep,
because you don't want to wipe out a whole committee at once.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
exactly. It's pretty much half and half. It's pretty consistent. So the next thing, I'm making a recommendation, and I did I think I emailed Mike and Jason that we were gonna talk about this. I'd like to recommend, and we don't have to decide obviously tonight or even make any recommendations, that the road and rec committees meet before the planning commission meeting. If that doesn't work with everybody's schedules, it's just a wish of mine, so if it doesn't work, it doesn't work.
Why?
But it would make more sense to have your meeting and then come in and make your recommendations right now. And then the next week, there's a little bit of a time lag that's shorter. And then the next week, you hit the board, unless it's a 5-week month. But I'd like you to think about it when have your next meetings, and gear more to the planning side rather than being before our meeting.
So, isn't it of value to have some time for the authority in the appointing board? Isn't it some value to have some time after recommendations have been made to give it some time and thought before? I mean, it sounds like knee-jerk. If you have, say, the road committee come up with something, or the recreation committee, they really report to the planning commission. So if they have something that comes up in their committee meeting, and they want it discussed or whatever, seems to me like if it's going to come right to the board real quick, the township board, it seems like you've lost the time for the authoritative planning commission to give it more thought. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe
Well, it gives them a week.
Huh?
It gives them a week, usually.
Well, what you're saying is to have the rec and the road committee prior to the planning commission meeting, and then they move from there right to the planning commission meeting.
Right.
No.
Maybe I didn't say that right, I'm sorry.
Is this what you're saying?
That's what
then?
I'm suggesting,
No.
yeah.
Is there any problem in doing it that way, rather than what?
That's
they're
what I'm
doing now?
asking, that they kind of talk about it the next time they get together
Well,
at the
I
planning
don't
level.
think you necessarily need a lot of talk if it's a matter of who's on what schedule, what works
Right.
out conveniently.
That's what
But
I'm saying, with the
if
people's
something
schedules.
comes out of
if
either
we
one of
know.
those committees as a motion or as a consensus, it doesn't take a lot of thought after that, because it is what it is. It's either a motion or a consensus, and it can go right to the planning commission after that. It doesn't matter. But it just depends on the people who are on those committees, whether they can do the move to Wednesday or not.
That's what I'm asking, so if you can just think about it, or streamlining and organizing and keeping, it kind of goes back again to who reports to who and who has to, the levels. It's a little more cohesive.
But the question is what's going on now a problem? If it's not,
Sometimes it is, when Jason and I.
Actually, it is right now.
Yeah,
Oh,
when
is
we're
it?
going back and forth, yeah.
And what happened here just this week is the bid packets were open from the road rehab maintenance bids this year on the 30th. We met at the road committee last week to make recommendations, but we couldn't bring the recommendations right to the board. They had to go to the planning commission, which is this week, so those bids are going to set for almost 3 weeks before they're awarded.
And that's what I said, it's nice even in a every other week month, at least it's now it can be 2 weeks, when it's a 3-week month, it could be 4 weeks. So at least it gets to the planning, and in most cases, they're the odd week of us, depending on how many weeks are in the month. So it's just it's a little quicker, it's a little more direct, they've already had their discussion, let's talk to planning about it right now, while it's fresh, and they're here. And then you just put a thing on your agenda that says, rec committee, whatever, report or discussion, or however you want to log it. And then that would be whether the whole committee stays, or just the chair, or the representative, or whoever's, they would come in and say, okay, this is what our motions were, and you can address it at the time. And if you have to put it off, that's fine. If it's something that comes to us, it's next week. It's just a little more, so
Well, and
chew on it.
And the planning meets at 7, so if you had your committee meetings at 5, you'd have more time to talk also, rather than either that or move your meeting to 5:30, so that,
They're 5:30 now.
oh, they 5. So it only gives you an hour, but at least with a 7 o'clock meeting, it'd give you an hour and a half. if you
And
need
again, the
time.
whole committee doesn't have to stay. It could just be one person, or the chair, or the secretary, or whoever. Just give the report, or just show the motions, or whatever. Think about it. So that's what I'm asking. Ernie?
Kind of following up on Dave on the bids and that, the time frame that you're waiting for before anything can happen, is that going to create a problem in getting everything done this summer that you want to do?
I don't know. We haven't awarded them yet, so we don't know.
Well, when will you be awarding them?
The
When will the
board
board
meeting.
be awarding them? They'll consider it after the planning commission meeting this week, and then the board will get it next week.
The 19th, yeah.
Okay, so we can't go out and work a short work session or a special
We could
session.
do, both of us could do special meetings.
You could have a special meeting to get it awarded, but it wouldn't just be one agenda
That's the
item.
question I'm talking about right now.
Is it gonna hurt to wait? I suppose is the better question.
I don't know, to tell you the truth. They were antsy to get going on the 30th.
Well, let me do an offshoot here, because Randy and I just talked about this, and then he sent me an email too, because he wasn't gonna be here. I have said before that I thought what I would call standing committees, road and rec, should be dissolved. In the last year or two, I've kind of rethought that. I don't think the road committee, as it stands, needs to exist. If Pete and Dave want to be the liaisons, the arms, the eyes, the coordinators, that can be a board appointment. Not that I'm trying to get rid of volunteers or who anybody else might help, but having that committee is kind of a waste in my mind. Recreation should meet as planning directs them to, or as the board directs them to. So going forward, do they need a meeting every month? I'm thinking no. While we're doing projects, yes. So that can evolve, but I brought it up because of the road committee idea. I think we just have one or two, we could do 3 if we had to, but 2 board members, and they just take care of it. We have a different structure now on roads, especially with the millage, than we did in the past, where, 7 people would get together from the road committee and make these recommendations and drive around the township. It's not like that anymore. So if you guys have a meeting whenever, it doesn't have to be da-da-da-da-da,
Sounds like it's a committee of the board that
Yeah.
you're suggesting.
So you'd have a
Yeah.
3-person committee, like the personnel committee, and then they could actually come directly to the board instead of going to planning.
Right.
So
Because our
you
situation's
could have a couple of
different.
board members be, as you have it now anyway, the road committee, and then they would do the action.
Yep.
And it wouldn't take the formal, wouldn't need to be as formal.
Right, like you said, or
And then,
they can come right to the board.
I guess I don't understand what difference it makes.
It makes a lot of difference.
It's still a
Right
committee.
now, you're under planning for one thing, and you've got, in this case.
You wouldn't be
your
under
example,
planning, you'd be right.
You'd just
to
be
the
a board appointed.
It doesn't really matter from my perspective. We can abolish them all. I don't care.
But for now, where everything is set up, I'm concerned with waiting to accelerate this and get it going and that, so we don't lose any time in the long run and that too.
Well, you're talking about the project specifically, I'm talking about in generalities.
I know that, so.
so
It'll get done, it just might not get done timely. It'll get done before
Yeah, and
the
I can
snow.
talk to Randy. If he wants us to call a special meeting, we can. If planning has to, we can. You know, we don't want to hold stuff up for 2-3 weeks if we can help it. It would take, what, 10 minutes to have a special meeting? We could do it any time of the day or night in that instance. But what I'm focusing on now is the operation part of it. So when we talk about this at the board level, I'd kind of like to have, I'm going to suggest each one of these and then vote on them. It gives you time. And if we don't do this at the next meeting, because the planning needs to be, talked about, or you guys need to have a rec meeting or whatever, we can put it off till July. It doesn't have to be done. And then we can just decide, one way or the other, how these are set up.
I guess I'm not sure I'm following the logic stream here.
Of what? Of the structure of the road committee?
Changing the whole structure, I don't understand what that's all about.
Well, I thought I just said that.
Yeah,
Streamlining.
but I didn't understand it then either.
The time frame. You mean making it a?
The time frame is normally not significant and normally, if the road committee had something like that bid opening, they just would have came right to the board meeting that night with it. Because the board is actually the one that said, send it out for bids. So,
I don't know that, if that might be a Roger question, if you still have to go through planning. I don't know, maybe
We
not.
can set it up any way we want.
Well, he's saying now, that's the way it is.
It's the way it
I-
is structured now.
I don't know that
I mean,
it's,
in the past, other than this last time, in the past when there was something like that, it just came directly to the board instead of waiting for the planning commission to, because they're really kind of a pass-through on that anyway, because the planning commission, they don't have anything to do with roads.
still under their auspices, and that's
I
the point I'm
understand that.
trying to make.
I understand
It's
that.
not necessary, in my mind.
I don't, doesn't matter to me if they're under the board or if they're under planning, I don't think it makes any difference.
To you.
Yeah, but I'm not sure I'm following the just get rid of the committee and have 2 board members stand on a board committee.
Because, for one thing, if you want to pull in volunteers at some point to help on something, in the next 12 years, this project's going to stay the way it is. It's not going to change. The millage is good. You know what's happening. You're just working through that. There's no need for a committee. If you're a board committee, your time frame is more efficient, more centralized, that you can just come to us and we can do stuff, get it done. You don't have to. Right now, you're under planning, and I don't see the necessity of that.
I would agree with you, I don't see the necessity to be under planning.
Right.
But where I'm debating the issue is having just 1 or 2 board members be the road group, as opposed to having a committee, because if you look at what's going on, they're developing the asset management program, and while Isaac's doing that, it gets reviewed every month as to where it's at, and it's not done yet. And they're working on the road facilities master plan.
So you still got things working, you're still
Yeah,
working on it.
there's still things that are worked on every month. Right now, they're on chapter 5 of the road facilities master plan. And that will be that'll be the end of the year before that's done. And the master plan will be part of the planning commission, the master plan for the township. But you've got that master plan, you've got a rec master plan that is in mid-revision this year. That has to be revised. I would say if you want to do that after this year, you probably, if things are cleaned up and running smoothly, you might want to take a look at it again. But right now, every month, there's something being worked on both the rec and the road committee as far as the master plan rewrite and amendments. The road committee stuff, the maintenance, until that asset management program is up and running, that's a feet on the ground, looking at roads, writing stuff down, talking about them at meetings, making sure everybody's got their 2 cents worth in there, because everybody lives in a different part of the township and everybody looks at something different, and you bring it all to the committee, narrow it down and come up with a list of roads that need to be looked at. Until the asset management program's up and going, that's what it takes. We've been 3 months putting together a list of roads that need to have some maintenance done on them, and it's been 3 months of committee work.
And how many people are out doing that besides you?
Mike, Pete, myself. And we talk about it every month as far as what's on the list and what needs to be considered that's not on the list. And so there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. Now, if there was an asset management program up and running, that could take a lot of that away, because you just have a list of roads that the computer printed out, and somebody would have to go out and look at that list of roads. And that would be a different scenario. But as it stands, without the asset management program being done and running, then it's a lot of driving around on the grounds work to do that. Other than that, after this year and the master plan's done, I mean, that gets that off the agenda, so you're just down to the road maintenance.
Okay,
So you're saying that after this year, when things are hopefully cleaned up and done,
Assuming the asset management program is up and running by the end of this year and the road facilities plan has been amended for its 5-year cycle.
which we'll know by probably December.
If you don't, it's not gonna be done, right?
So then you can make a future motion that the following year we restructure these things.
Yeah, I think if you wanna trim the committee down by then, that's fine, because I don't think, if you're just looking at the maintenance portion of the road rehab, it's just a matter of getting a printout of from the asset management program and visiting those roads. And it was my recommendation before at the planning commission, and it still is that somebody becomes Paiser qualified, and I think Isaac's the likely candidate to do that. He's very close anyway. And if he's Paiser qualified, then he only needs one guy riding with him, because you can't do it alone. That's a rule. That's a county and a Paiser rule. Your Paiser ratings are not acceptable if they're done on your own. But only one person in the vehicle has to be Paiser certified. So that's a two-person job to ride around and visit the roads that the asset management program prints out on the list and says these are due for this type of maintenance this year. Isaac and I did that in 2 days this year. But then there are a bunch of other roads that we added in the mix because the asset management program isn't complete. So once that's done, and then you're just looking at one staff that is Paiser certified and somebody else to go with him to make it legitimate. And if you remember, the whole discussion from the board is, if you make the Paiser evaluations legitimate, there's actually money that can be gotten from the township, or to the township from the state, by doing those observations. And why not, right? You got a staff out there, you might as well get his time paid for. So once those are done, I mean, the process gets pretty easy. In the fall of a year is when it would ideally be done, before the weather breaks for worse. You print out an asset report, you look at the maintenance needs, and you do your evaluation that fall before the roads get covered up, and you get the bid out in January, so that you're on the top of everybody's list. This year we come out, because of the amount of work that had to be done, this year it come out May 30th, the bid's closed. We're a little late. We only got one bidder
Yeah,
in that whole process, because everybody else has got their dance card filled up already. So we need to move it forward, but if we want to get the best price and we want to get a choice of contractors, we need to have it done before the weather, we need to have it done by the end of October. And we need to have bids out so they close sometime in January. That would be ideal, because that's where we're going to get our best price. And that's where we get our best choice of contractors, but we haven't reached that point yet. So right now, it's more boots on the ground, and Isaac and I and Pete and Mike, we've been out scrounging around streets and picking out problems and bringing them to meetings and writing them down. And then when Isaac and I went out, we just had a list of everybody's complaints, and we went out and did a review of all the streets that were done in the second year that we did our road rehab project. All the streets that were done that second year, plus any other streets that had come up on anybody's radar and were talked about at the meetings.
Okay.
But other than that, once that's smoothed out, that process gets pretty easy. At the end of this year, the road facilities plan will be done for another 5 years. And so that takes the work right down to next to nothing for the roads, because it's not like we have any money that we're gonna go out and do any more new roads.
So we can kind of do what I'm thinking and not worry about replacing Ron. So we could eliminate that position, make it could be a commissioner or the chair, in this case it's the chair, of planning, be your third member.
Well, in
Because
fact,
planning, because of the
that's the
road
three anyway.
maintenance side. Yeah, well, then we don't have to replace Ron and make it a board committee.
Yeah, and I don't think it matters if it's board committee or planning commission from my or planning committee from my perspective, because it just takes a week out of the
Just
cycle,
direction,
so.
just the direction. to
Well,
move.
all that stuff comes right to the board anyway, the planning commission really don't.
Then the road committee doesn't need to worry about meeting before the planning meeting either. They can meet whenever they want.
Well, then it would make more
And
sense
it's
to
not
meet.
considered, I don't think it'd be considered an open meeting either. It's just, you just meet, you know.
Well, then if it was done before the board meeting is all it would be required.
Yeah, that would probably be the easiest.
And if I understand board committees, there's not a motion or anything else at a board committee, it's just a matter of bringing your
Recommendation.
recommendations to the board.
The idea of a board committee, in my estimation, is that committees, and I'm not talking about the road committee, committees can be created, but then with time, they evolve to a point where they're no longer needed as a full committee, and that's what you're really saying.
Right.
Is that- and
Kinda eliminate that extra
The
committee.
option is, do you surgically reduce the committee, or do you create it in another way, making it a board committee, where it'd be a board member or two, and then you can do all that you're doing now, but it cuts out all the committee function.
Right.
Okay, I don't have a problem with that. I don't even have a problem with waiting in some cases till the first of the year.
Yeah.
But it does need to be dealt with by the board probably now, so that we can do those
Switch it to a board
things.
committee, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, a board committee is something common in many, many other organizations. And the board committee has a lot more latitude because they can meet whenever they damn well please. And they can meet and come right to the board because they're a board member.
Yep.
And they can turn to each other and say, this is what we recommend. And you can get action overnight.
I would like to see some guidelines for a board committee, because I'm not familiar with it.
That's why I
So it'd
wanted
be nice to see
chew on
something in
those.
writing.
See what you think of the process.
You can even stipulate, even further to help Dave with that, the board committee creation can have mission and goal.
Like a standalone, yeah.
And that helps, because they may need to be unique to the committee you're creating.
True.
Well, I don't work and play well with others if I don't have guidelines, so.
Yeah, I'll
You
look
need to
into
have
that.
something in
Yeah,
writing so that.
But anyway, it's a solution to a problem, but usually it comes about under the focus of the board after a committee has created most of its project and it becomes less needed or less urgent that you have a full committee.
Well, I personally would like to do some research on board committees, so I'm a little more comfortable with what they do and how they function, and I still think what you're referring to is some kind of guidelines or bylaws, call them what you want, for how the board committee is gonna operate.
But they don't have to be general. They can be specific
That's fine.
in the assignment. There's all kinds of them.
And we've got more
And-
flexibility.
And I would think that something about having a general committee of 5 people, let's say, and then 2 of them be board members, really takes away from the goal of having citizen involvement when it's already tainted with board involvement and follow.
That was the first thing that made me think of it, having Dave and Pete work on it together. And initially, last year or the year before, when the the road committee renewed, I had asked both of them if they were gonna switch. And I think Pete misunderstood me, because I thought one would go to Rex and one would go to roads. And Pete said, no, I wanna stay on the road
Yeah.
because of the project. So it defeats the purpose, like you said, of the committee, the definition of the committee and how it operates and who it answers to. So if we're gonna have committees, they need to be effective. The timeline needs to be effective. Who they respond to needs to be, it's not right the way it is. So we have to fix it somehow. And then what made me more think of it, like I said, was I'd either have to replace Ron or leave the structure the way it is. But in my mind, the road committee does not need to function the way it is. It can be a board committee, can have 2 board members, they can take care of it, whichever 2, I'm thinking forward thinking, not just right now. Planning would make sense to have that connection because of the road maintenance part of the master plan. And that's it, that's all they need. Then they can come to us, they can schedule their meetings, it's not an open meetings, it's more efficient, it's,
Well, it's somewhat
It's a
open.
better
You could-
tool.
You could still have public come to those.
yeah.
So they have to be posted and minutes
yeah.
have to be taken.
But they don't have to follow the actual,
Well,
as
actually,
much
they-
as we do.
Well, they do in some respects, but it's a little bit, whenever you got a meeting of 3 or more people, you should have minutes of the meeting, and public needs to know about it, or we cross that fine line that we don't want to.
I'm not saying
So-
it's gonna be secret or
Yeah,
anything
no,
like that.
but it should be minutes taken, who's there, public can be invited, unless it's a closed session item, which there's reasons for that. Otherwise, we don't want to cross that fine line.
Well, they'd have to have some notes, because they're gonna have to report.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Well, that's why I'd just like some time to do some research on it, because I'm sure we're
Yep, this doesn't have to be done
passing
now.
over some things that we haven't considered yet. If the same requirements for a 5-person committee is, if the same requirement is that you have to take minutes and you have to subscribe those minutes and they have to get approved and all that stuff, if that's the same requirement, I'm not sure where you're saving the work, except you're putting more work on 2 people. Because they gotta do all that, as opposed to a committee doing all of that.
Okay.
And I can check with Roger, but I just know that even 3 people, and like you have a personnel committee, which is 3 members of the board, minutes have to be taken. The-
Yes.
The meeting has to be posted and public can come and speak.
And that could possibly be the determination of whether you wanted a 2-person board committee or a 3-person committee, as to whether it has to subscribe to all those guidelines or not.
But even a board committee can draw on support from the staff or without that person becoming a board member or a committee member. A committee of the board is normally just a few people, but that doesn't keep them from having other aid available.
Right, yeah, that's why I said, if you've got something going on, you can bring other people in.
And that's all I'd like to find out, is what the rules are
Right.
for a board committee.
You're gonna find that there's a wide open book.
Well,
I
that may
will-
be the case, but
I will check with Roger as far as if we have a board committee of 2 board members and like the member of the planning commission, what's their duties if they have
I'm
any?
thinking there's all kinds of information right online that we can look all at.
I'm sorry, I didn't pull that. I wanted to see if you guys were amenable at all to doing this.
Well, Roger will know it won't cost us that much money.
I think what you're saying is the committees are all evolving. We have to look at and see how they're evolving. Do they stay the same, or can we change them somehow?
Yeah, I do take a little offense when she's referring to the road committee as dysfunctional.
Yeah.
Did I say that word?
Pretty much.
So, in the realm of committees and how they operate, it is. They don't operate the way they're designed to in a legislative body with a body. Ours don't.
And in a funny way, of all the committees that we've had a tremendous amount of success with, was the road committee. I mean, so maybe it wasn't so bad to
I think
talk.
the road and the rec committee have done a lot of work over the last 4 or 5
They
years.
have.
Oh, yeah, I'm not, you're missing the whole point. That's not what that's not what I'm saying at all.
I just said I took a little offense.
I'm not belittling either. I'm talking about the structure,
You're gonna,
that's all.
if you keep it up,
Yeah, we need to change
somebody's
subjects.
gonna take
He's gonna be
back
throwing blows.
the thank you to your husband.
I think what amounts to, you look at the evolution of the committees. Are they doing that? Is there something we can do about it to make them better, worse, whatever it wants to, and just go forward?
Well, and I think Dave made an important point. End of November, early December, we'll know where we're at, and you'll know whether or not you
I
need
agree.
to restructure for the.
And I think near the end of this year, when the road facilities plan is done and the rec plan is done, and it's being brought into the master plan, that's a time to, I mean, the workload goes way down, but even in the rec committee, you're working on a whole chapter every month. And it takes everybody's input to get that smoothed out. And Isaac's doing all the typing on it and doing all the drafting, but it's a lot of work. I'd hate to see that down to 1 or 2 people. And then again, if once you do that, and I don't have any problem doing that, restructuring those committees, whether they're a board committee or whatever. I'm a little hesitant on the board committee because I don't know anything about them, and I don't know how they function. And if the responsibilities of a board committee don't get less, if you can't keep it to the size that doesn't require all the minutes and all that stuff that has to be done, then you kind of lose me on the reason for doing it. I'm thinking if you have down to a 2-person board committee, it doesn't have all those restrictions, then I'd like to look it up and find out before I jump in with both feet. But I don't really have a problem with it, and I think at the end of this year, the road committee will get light enough on their workload if asset management is completed and the road facilities plan is done. Then we've got, the only rush the road committee will have on an annual basis is towards fall every year to go out and come back with recommendations for maintenance for the next year. And when the 5-year road facilities plan is due for amendment again, if you need to pull in a couple extra people to get that done, I would think you could do that as part of a board committee.
They go away.
And then they go away. And I would think it's the same thing for the rec committee, and Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, I think that once the rec plan is done, unless you're working on something specific, I've been working on the underpass, and been working on a lot of things, but it's coming to an end. Unless somebody comes up with some beneficiary that's gonna throw a bunch of money at us, I don't see a lot of things coming in on the horizon unless we decide to do something about collecting some millage get some matching funds together so we can move forward on some more rec plans. But that's neither here nor there. That's a decision that the board will have to take into consideration as whether they want to do something like that. And I don't see that happening this year because we're already talking about putting a lot of things on the ballot.
Why can't we just leave it as is, to move along with this, leave it as is until after around the first of the year, and you see if you get your asset management plan done. Ron said he will make what meetings he can, so that we don't have to replace him yet.
Proposing this has to, well, I do to a point if it depends on his, yeah. I might have to either replace him or have him off of there or something. I don't know yet. But this isn't gonna happen tomorrow. This is one of the things that we have to get taken care of to stay in the continuity of the policy governance.
Well, and it
And
also,
it's gonna involve some appointments coming up, so I wanna have it in order before we start having to replace people.
Well, the road committee's kind of headed that way by just the attrition. And I don't think we should replace Ron. He should make the meetings he can make and just leave it go. And we should schedule this for some kind of a decision on how you want to change the committees on about November.
Yeah, that's fine.
Because that can
Doesn't
be
have to
done then before the
tomorrow.
start of next year and
Well, I have a lot more meetings for you guys
we'll
this
have a
year.
better idea
Get this
of
out of the way.
where the plans are coming from and where asset management is and all that stuff.
Okay,
And we'll have a better idea of the underpass. Project should be all taken care of by then.
okay,
well, and also too, you gotta remember, this is like our first year under policy governance, so we're growing still, we're evolving. And, under policy governance, committees really don't exist unless you have a charge.
that's why I'm
So
trying
we're
to
kind of
smooth them
unique,
out a little bit.
yeah, we're kind of unique in that we do have committees, but I'm thinking what we can do is, like I said, November, see where we're at, we can restructure for the following year.
Yep.
In the meantime, between now and November, it would be nice to see some information distributed that discusses board committees and how
Right.
they function, so that everybody is working off the same sheet.
Yep, that sounds good. That's why I wanted to have the discussion. I'm more interested in dissolving these at the bottom of the page, so
I
Yes.
do have to apologize, I have to
now you
leave.
gotta go pretty quickly.
Now move on then.
No. Yeah, that,
Doesn't wanna- Right after he leaves.
the only other thing I'd like to do on that part of it too is make sure that each of the committees that we do have standing, and there's a bunch of them, has some kind of a vice chair so that actions can still happen and depending on, like Board of Review really doesn't, just any of these that can have, especially the rec committee.
The Board of Review, I think we gotta replace Keith, he left.
Yeah, we do.
So we gotta find someone for him.
Yeah.
So let's make that, so we have that.
Oh, yeah, that's the purpose of this, is so I can figure out what I need be working on and who to corral. So anyway, vice chairman, I'd like to see that happen. Now, these next four, and I checked with Randy just so that this isn't my opinion, he agrees too, that these four don't need to exist. Beautification, Library Advisory Council, Senior Services, and Speed Limit Review. We have no
I
more,
like the speed limit one.
we have no more control over the
Yeah.
speed limits anymore.
That's why I like control of it.
It's gone. Senior Services doesn't exist in the city anymore, that
Right,
group.
I know
So
that.
they don't need to be there. Library Advisory Council, I want to talk about that for a few minutes, even though Dan had to leave. And beautification, Mary Beals and Linda Winslow agreed to take two of the boxes and just do it on their own. We buy the flowers and whatever. And
We don't
they
need a
said
committee for
they don't
that.
need a committee for that, they'll just do it. And if they can't do it, somebody else can in the future. It doesn't have to be a standing committee. You see what I'm trying to do here? It's just, this is a lot of people, and if we have people who are willing to serve and we can put them in some functions that are vital, that's important, and have them, not having a lot of meetings that we don't need to have. That's what I'm trying to get to. It has nothing to do with the people that exist or the board or what their function is. I just want to make sure it's efficient, it's timely with the board, they know who they answer to. That's the purpose of this, okay?
Okay.
There's nothing else.
Just for clarity, can we move back up to F for a minute? I would think, for clarity's sake, that's not a contract. It reports to
Manager.
reports to the manager and takes direction from the board.
Yeah, that's what I have done there.
Yes.
Okay.
Randy told me contract, and I wrote it down because I
No,
was
it's not
typing
the
it to
contract.
get it in your mailboxes.
So you're blaming the manager who's
Yes,
not
I
here?
am. I will verify that. I've got it on here.
The only thing I'd have to say about the Library Advisory Council is we
That-
get two positions, and that's our conduit.
Well, we'll talk about that, though. I agree. That's a whole different, that's why I gave you more stuff. That's a whole nother discussion. Like I said, I wish Dan was still here, and we can talk about it again. But if we at least get rid of beautification, senior, and speed limit review. I think that's a plus. And you've got the committees listed below. I put them all in order. I put I corrected all of our 11/20 for our due dates, our expiration dates. Kind of streamlined it a little bit better. Tells you who the board rep is, what the terms are, how many members, some of them are appointed. So I don't really see anything else that we have control over that we could eliminate.
Are these all supposed to be accurate?
As accurate as we know.
As we
they
can
are.
tell.
Well, the
Andrew and I always have a problem with the expiration dates, the term
Well,
dates.
just the planning commission's, Pelto's not there anymore.
Right, that's why I said I did not change anything, so that I know going forward who I have available to use.
Let's see if I got this right. You're blaming other stuff on the manager, and now you're blaming Andra?
No, because we were talking, I thought when you said accurate, you were talking about the terms. No, I'm not talking about the representative. The terms are a problem, because she has different term dates, expiration dates on almost everybody.
That's because she has them written in two different spots.
Exactly, and I've kind of suggested to her how, she's not my employee, I can't tell her what to do, but I've suggested she change her book, and I gave her specifics on how to do it. I don't know. So anyway, the terms would be good. If we can get them all for December, that's a big plus. As far as, who's in here, no, I didn't change anything, because I want to see who I have available and what's left.
On senior services, true that they don't have anything, but Pete brought up one here a number of meetings ago, like Charlie's doing.
Yep, I'd like to do that.
And that may be something that we should probably explore more within the next year to see if it's something, a direction we even want to go in that too.
But we don't need a committee for that.
No, we don't. And he said that he's asked a bunch of people, and they're not interested. It was the last I talked to him.
Okay,
But that doesn't mean it can't come up again, absolutely. But yeah, we don't need a committee for it.
okay.
There are not a lot of volunteers to work. And like I said, if we've got people who are willing to serve and we can put them on vital committees, that's invaluable. And if we have people that are on a list and they never come or don't meet or whatever, it's just a waste. So, again, these are recommendations. We can put them on an agenda whenever and talk about them more. This is more information for you to have the discussion. And like I said, I put the lines next to the committee list so that we can make our changes and change dates and take Ron out or not, or take Steve out, whatever. Just, that's updated, and I'll get it to Andra, and we'll verify the dates and everything. So that was those pages. It's something for you to work on or work with.
We're not working on them now?
No, this is just a discussion, work session. But let's talk about, before we get too far, the TAC committee.
Got mine mostly done.
Which committee?
The Township Advisory Council for the library. That's the extra thing I just gave you just now. Andrea just sent it to me this morning. So that's why I didn't get it to you any sooner. You got 4 pages here, 5 pages. She thought it might be helpful. I spent an hour with her yesterday. And I said, it's going to be my recommendation to the board that we dissolve the TAC. That's
At least
how I.
our representatives.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, yes.
You can't just.
No,
dissolve the
not
TAC.
theirs. That has nothing to do with us. I'm talking about us. So by the time the hour was up, we came to a couple different understandings. She said, how about if I send you the bylaws, which she did, to understand how they're supposed to function. She agrees with me completely that the representatives we have are unique in that they don't talk to us at all. They don't give us a report. They
Well-
don't get our input. They don't represent us in any way to the TAC. And we're the only municipality that this is an issue. And I said, then we either need to fix it and get more structure with the people that are supposed to be representing us, or we eliminate it. I mean, we only have so many options on what to do with it. So she said, okay, to that end, let me send you some history of how the TAC, and I know this stuff because I went to the TAC, and I mean, I don't know it verbatim, but I researched a lot of this stuff when I started going to their meetings. So I know kind of how they evolved. But she did also suggest that because some of the other townships were having issues with their members too before she came in, that they actually wrote up a job description. And she said, you might want to consider bringing your people in who are your TAC representatives and discussing with them what we expect. And I said, that sounds great. We've got the job description, what they're supposed to do, and whether that's just me, or we have a work session, or Randy does it, or a couple board members, it doesn't make any difference. But the whole idea is to have that line of communication. And those two ladies do not expire until 2020, so it's not as though they're going to renew this year and then we can consider it for next year. They're still a committee member for a while. And unless we actually dissolve it, they're not going to go away. So the discussion I want to have is, how can we get better communication? Andrea said, she said, I can't come to all your board meetings. And I said, well, obviously not. She's willing to make an annual report. And she's going to suggest to her board that occasionally 1 or 2 or 3 of their board members attend our meeting. The part of the problem is their meeting, they have one a month, is right before our second meeting of the month. If you remember, I was usually kind of late getting here because they met from 5:30 to 7. Sometimes it was 8 and I'd have to leave. So that's part of the problem. They could, if it is their board member, they could come, for an hour, or just come and make a report and then take that back to their board. So the number one thing here is, how do we make this connection? How do we keep the communication line open to take our wishes, needs, wants, suggestions to them and have them notify us as to what they're doing, either with our ideas, with our, I don't want to say our money, I mean collectively, the township's money, and what they'd like to do, get our input. To me, that has to happen, and if it's not working, we need to either fix it or get rid of it. I know you've got a face.
A few of us actually served in this capacity. I think any of us that have served have come to the conclusion that the board of the Peter White Public Library really receives no information from the Township Advisory Council that has resulted in any revision at all.
Mm-hmm.
So some of us have served, I served as a head of it, and found that even as the chair of the advisory council, you were introduced you're the only one that, from the advisory council, that's allowed to attend their meetings. That's a fact.
As the chair, you mean?
As the chair is the only welcome member of the advisory
Well,
council.
They've already changed that.
Huh?
They've already changed that. That's not the case anymore.
Well,
Any one of the they all take turns and they give reports.
okay. Well, then you can speak to how much input is allowed and accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Well, I'm pretty sure even when I was attending, because I had two-part. I was the TAC for a while, and then I did the board representation. So that's when I was going to the board meetings. When I was with the TAC, I agree with you, 100%, it was a waste of time, and that's what I brought to this board. I don't believe any of the library board members are the same. I don't think there's one board member on there that's the same anymore. And you have a brand-new director who thinks totally differently than previously. And they have made these changes. And even when I met with Jim Jajic, as he was kind of going out, he had no idea what the TAC did or how they didn't do. And he started the process of changing what they did before he even left the board. So they realize the importance of this now, and I think they've realized it because of dealing with us, that we've griped about this enough that they were not functioning properly. Although they did say, she said, we're the only one that does not have this connection. Some of the, I think it's Chocolat's board has a member on the TAC. They are the representative, and they report back and forth. So the committee, the advisory council, if you want to call it that, has already evolved how they function and what they do with the board. And a TAC member every month sits at the table of the board, the library board now, and reports back and forth. It takes that information back. They're still only meeting quarterly, but their packets are also now included. The TAC has a packet, and it's part of the board packet now. So they've come a long way in how they structure it, how it operates, and it seems to be more effective for the communities than it was. Because they would just sit there and talk about what library stuff was going on. There was nothing. There was no work. It was just like, oh, so-and-so, you fixed the rug over here, and you replaced this, and oh, didn't you see they put the book up here, and they had this program? It was like, that's not business. It was a waste of time. And when I made the suggestion to talk about changing the method of funding, you just swore I told them that the world was coming to an end. They just kind of all went, what? We don't talk about that stuff here. So the whole complexion has changed, the whole atmosphere. And I haven't been to one of their meetings, but just from what I've heard and how I've seen their packets, it's different. So I'm trying to give them the benefit of the doubt because I think we need that line of communication to be stronger.
Why don't our personnel report on a more regular basis to the board?
Because they've been on this committee for a long time, on TAC, and I haven't talked to them.
From the old guy.
They're used to doing things the way, and they're not following suit with what's been changed on the TAC. Andrea mentioned, she admitted that. So, nothing against the ladies. They want to volunteer, and I told her, I said, maybe they want to volunteer in a different way and doing something else. Maybe we need to, and that's when she suggested the description. She said, well, maybe you actually need to put up like a help wanted ad and have the description. And I said, well, do you know when their terms expire? And I didn't have this with me. And she said, no, I don't. And I said, well, if it's the end of the year, that would be okay. The board would probably go for that. But if it's a longer term, I don't want to say you're out, I don't know if that's my place or our place to kick them off of a committee. Maybe it is.
Well, wait.
But we need to.
If there are appointed representatives.
Yeah, well, we
I
didn't even.
think you do have
We didn't even appoint them.
They don't get to appoint them.
No, but I mean, this board didn't. So,
The lawyer told me a long time ago, any volunteer on our committees can be excused at any time.
anytime. So the term limitations doesn't have any,
No,
there's no
if we,
restriction
if we
there?
say we want to end this committee to, next board meeting, it's done, it's gone.
Okay,
And we could actually say, we're going to end this committee, but we're going to have a board representative go to the TAC. We're restructuring it. And then it's done and over with.
well, if you remember, I asked the board to do that too, and nobody volunteered. That's why I started going to
That's
their
because
meetings.
some of us have been there.
Right.
Well, maybe it's different now.
I know, no.
Dave and Dan are the new guys on the block. No, but I figured we had to have this discussion on what happens going forward. And again, this is just a work session, so it's for,
Well,
We don't have to
you're
decide this
saying that-
tomorrow.
You're saying that the activity of that committee, the
Yeah.
advisory committee, has changed. Okay, I'll accept that. I haven't seen it, but for Dave and some others that may want to know, how did that come about? Well, there was a lot of complaints from the townships, not just this township, but a lot of the townships, about the fact that they were paying millage in, but weren't being represented. It didn't get hot and heavy, but it was always there. So the then previous librarian,
The director,
pardon?
Director. the previous director.
Yeah, okay. She came up with this idea and proposed it to the then commission of the city of Marquette, that they allow her to create this advisory group, but they wouldn't have any vote and the input would not change. That's how that got started. And I think that carried on for a long time. I'm pleased to hear that some of that has changed, but like so many other things that go on in the city, I don't think they're ever going to give up the power of control.
Well, no,
They're
this,
never
that's,
gonna do that. so.
this is not about power of control.
I would suggest sending this to the two representatives at this point in time. And then,
I'd like to sit and visit with them and
Okay.
see if we can do something, you know.
Well, I
if
know
they're willing.
Ora Jane does send me, and I do put them in the packets. They only meet quarterly. She does send the minutes. I do get the minutes, and they go in the board packet quarterly, but remember, it's only quarterly they meet, so you're not gonna see much from them, you know, just on a quarterly basis. So unless we direct them to do something, I don't know if you can really blame them.
To give you an example of what it would be like, if the sanitation group, the
Landfill.
landfill, if that advisory group decided that they wanted to do what the city and the former library director did, they would form a committee of it, much like this,
A liaison.
and you wouldn't have any input at all. But it is their way of answering, well, we have an advisory committee. But that really, it's an advisory committee that makes very little input directly to where the decisions are made.
but I think.
But they bring that information back and forth, and we have nothing now. That's the biggest part of it. Library has no idea what we care, what we think about or want to see. They have no idea.
Or what we would like to see happening in the township in the next 3 to 5 years in that too.
Yeah.
So,
Recommendations or anything, they have no idea. We have no idea what they're working on. We can, and she also asked what we would like to see in our packets. She's totally happy with sending the board packet.
Oh.
Their packets are huge.
Yeah.
They're just way too big, and I said, well, maybe the financials, the minutes, the agenda, and the committee, the heads, the department head reports, because they're usually a page or two.
so maybe what you need to do, Lynn, as a supervisor, sit down with Ora Jane and Mary and kind of go over this with them and say, this is like the board would like to see or get, and see what kind of feedback you
And
get.
if they say, no, we just soon, leave it the way it is, or yeah, we're willing to come and report every month. Personally,
Well, not every month, because they only meet quarterly.
well,
so.
that's where I was going with this. Personally, I think we should have an appointment. I'd like to see it be a board member, but it could be a township resident to go to the board meetings. I don't care about the TAC. That's why I said, in my mind, that committee could be dissolved.
Okay.
We need representation and a voice at the board level every month. That's,
Okay.
what- in my mind, that's what should
Okay,
happen.
you're saying have someone representing the township as an agent sent there,
Yes,
would go to their
board meeting.
board meeting
Right.
and then report what they hear there. They won't be allowed to talk.
Yes, they are.
Well,
They have public comment like we do, front, top and the bottom.
But they don't have
used
a,
to-
they don't have a
If
vote.
you,
No, of
if
course
you
not.
sent somebody like Dave, or you sent Ernie, and they talked, they'd change the rules.
To not let them talk at all.
Yeah.
They used to ask me a lot of questions when I would go. And I was just a trustee, coming, looking at the meeting. They would constantly refer to me and they'd say, Lynn, during their talk, Lynn, you know, when we were talking about the tribunal, what, do you remember how that worked? And then they'd ask me and I'd stand up and I'd give them the answer.
I think the
There
biggest.
was interaction, it was good.
Biggest thing is that their funding is taxpayers' money. And the minute you do that, a whole different environment opens up. And you get into the Open Meetings Acts and you get into everything else in that too. How
Well-
much, I don't know, but,
Well, and I think since the new director took over and you have a new board, things are different. They're
Right.
not, John's probably right, trustee Marks, when he went there, they, you know, I could see with the previous director, she didn't like that sort of stuff, so it didn't happen. The new director seems a lot more open.
If you remember, and maybe you don't, they actually went into closed session in the middle of the meeting and kicked everybody out. And I called the city clerk and said, I'm sorry, you can't do that. What's going on? I don't know if you remember that or
yes,
not.
yeah.
And there was something else that they did too, and I ended up talking to the county clerk, and they fixed it. They didn't even realize, back in the day, this is previous administration, what they were to do and not do. The Open Meetings Act, that whole thing, they had no clue how it was functioning. Now they do.
Well,
So-
you got people there that have never been involved with all this, and all of a sudden they're in this, and they don't realize that their state statute that they have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
But I think meeting with our two reps and see how they go this way. and
That's a start.
I would think that, especially after last Tuesday's board meeting and the director made her comments out there, I think that she is genuinely making an attempt to get some things out into the community, not just at the library. And I commented that, and I was impressed by her whole approach to it. I think the whole atmosphere there is kind of ripe for change, and I think she's going to be agreeable to make some of those changes that she can make. And I think some of those basic changes, John, that you didn't like about when you were on there, I think that could be changed.
think a lot
I
of
bet,
them are.
I will bet that if you had a rep there, a board rep, or whatever you want to call them, that actually went to the board meetings, I will bet that you could get them to change their meeting, their agenda structure so that those reps could make a comment.
Call it a committee report or whatever.
Yeah, call it a rep
Whole-
report or whatever you want to do,
Yeah.
but they could make a report to the board.
Yeah.
And that's a step to getting some say in what's going on there.
If nothing
They
else.
may not pay attention to it, but at least you get to say something.
But if, you know, from an employee standpoint, when I worked for some of these corporations, they'd come in and unilaterally change stuff, how I was working. And it used to drive me crazy. So when I change stuff in my company, I go to the people that are doing the job. And I say, this is what I'm thinking of doing, kind of like what I'm doing here. This is what I'd like to see happen. Do you see it working? What do you see the problems are? So if you have a community that they're receiving funding from, not all of our residents can come to the library board meeting, not all of them can come here. If they know that we have a voice of objection, suggestions, recommendations, anger, whatever, it just makes for a better conversation. And whether we have power or a vote, that's not gonna change. It's not gonna change now. Not in my term or my lifetime, probably. You open those two charters, you've got a rat's nest, because they're both structured through the library charter and the city charter. So what we have to try to work on is offer some ideas and suggestions, tell them what our issues are, and I think they'd be more willing to help. And while we don't have a vote, we can have an impact, even as subtle as it would be.
The impact we have, if you looked at that information that the director provided, the financial stuff, 1/3 of their budget comes from the townships. Without that, she was talking about Sundays, want to reopen, she'd be very lucky if she could open 4 days a week, if the townships all dropped it real quick, and then the whole thing would change drastically, so. So the biggest thing the townships have going for it is financial, so.
And I think she realizes that, and that's why she's
I
trying,
think the librarian realizes.
Yeah, and I think-
I agree.
she's trying to do more, and she's trying,
But she's under the control.
Well,
Any way
yeah.
you cut it, she's under the
Still works for the
control of her
board.
commission.
Yeah, that's fine, and I don't even know who they are now, like I said, they've all
And
changed.
I apologize, but even their mayor has gone in the paper and word for word says it's now their community center. Daily, it acts as a community center.
Whatever.
So-
There's
We
nothing
can't,
we
we
can
can't do anything about that, so.
I know the point you're trying to make, and I get it. I totally get it. But that's out of our hands. We gotta work on what we can have an impact on.
Well, I'm willing to give it a try.
I think
So
we
at
need
least
to
if
look
I
at what
start-
what can they do for the township,
Yep.
and go from that perspective and that.
well, like I said, you can't, we really haven't talked to them about it, so you can't really fault them. My opinion, so bring them in, talk to them, and maybe they're agreeable to do a little bit more, or we to say we're gonna go another structure, we're gonna restructure it and go another way.
The point, though, is, I think that's been made, is I'm not so sure whether these two representatives would be anywhere near as effective as a board.
Well, no, of course not.
So,
But there's only 7 of us, and so that,
but you can
One more
start it
meeting.
with this and then see where it goes. We got time. We're not,
Something for the township, like they got the children's stuff over to the mall right now. That's gonna be there until maybe fall. I was thinking the other day, this is something that we may want to have them research, see what they could do in the township. Not only for the township residents, but for everyone else in that, to make it available here. Parking down there is terrible, trying to get in and out of there.
Well, and another thing is too, is we have a nice community room, if they wanna come out and do some presentations here for our residents, that's something, it's related to township. And that sort of stuff that maybe they could do here versus down there. And, that's maybe what she was, looking for down the road. I mean, our community room's getting pretty booked, but I mean, it's an option.
I would just think that times they seem to be open to some more suggestions over there, and I think now would be the time to get some input to the board directly from this board, and I think they'd be open to that.
yeah, I think so too.
May change when the director changes, and the director may not be able to talk the board into making any changes, but I think they're more amenable to those kind of suggestions now than they ever have been in the past.
And,
agree.
and it's the same thing here, as our board changes in a couple years, who knows what that complexion will be. But even starting policy governance, if we can get this in a flow, it's all downstream, it's pretty much gonna carry. You kind of hope that what you start continues and doesn't get sidetracked. So I think if we start the path, it'll keep going.
I think the first thing is if you can meet with the 2 representatives and go that route and see what they're responsible. The board's gonna have to look at, how can we provide information to the library as to what we'd like to see in the township?
I think we need a little more direct, if they're gonna be there, we need somebody at the board meetings, if we can get somebody at the board meetings.
That's what
And we
I'm
need
hoping
somebody
might
that can make a
happen.
report back to the board, this board, on a more timely basis. It doesn't work to get the information 30 or 60 days later, it just doesn't work.
Well, we have to provide them with what the direction we think they should be going. That's our job.
Yep.
not to do so.
Yep, I'm not ready to just abandon these ladies. They're willing to volunteer, and they've been doing it, not to our pleasure, but they feel they're contributing and they want to volunteer.
Well, you know, I'm reading in here, and the duties for the TAC, I mean, it says they're the liaison between the library board of trustees and the township governing body that the member represents. I mean,
Yep.
should they then not be attending the board meetings?
This is a result of the discussion I had with Jim Jajic. He was the chair at the time, and he and,
Andrea
Andrea was just, I don't know,
starting.
barely new or hadn't even been taking the job yet.
She was here.
Well, we went down to the library. I met him down at the
Oh,
library.
okay.
Yeah, the three of us got together, and I went through all of this, and I think it was he who suggested they have a job description. I've run my gamut on talking. So, yes, that's really all I wanted to
Wait,
say.
I just think they need to do more than just go to the quarterly meetings.
No, they need to go to the board meetings.
They need to go to the board meetings, and whether they do it every
Or
other
one of
one,
us
every
goes.
other time, or somebody needs to go to the board meeting. There needs to be some feedback on what's actually going on currently.
Yep.
What
And-
happened there?
If it changes and we don't get the input we're looking at least we have some basis for our complaints.
My Mayo's doctor is setting up an appointment for me, just so you know. He's already got 3 departments
Well, anyway,
scheduled.
I think you've covered that.
Yes.
We can move on.
I think that's it. That's really all I wanted to cover. So, some of these issues will come up.
If we ever have a speed limit availability to us, we'll just redo it again, that's all. I'll have to write another thing for the MTA like I did last time, and they actually accepted it. This was back in the 90s, because we were not represented there, and I were going for the MTA conference, and they accepted it, and they modified it some when I got there, but we did have a voice. How big a voice, I don't know, but it was there.
So if I have consensus, I'm so sorry. I'd like to, I'll change, or check with Randy on the community events. I believe it's a manager of the board. Look at the term expirations, I'll verify those. Check that with Andrea.
Just one time I'd like to just see this sheet show up and actually be right.
Yeah, again.
Then we have nothing to discuss.
But it's never actually accurate.
Well, I know it isn't right now. Because I left everybody. I told you why. So I'd like to put on one of our agendas, maybe the next one, to abolish these 3 committees, beautification, senior services, and speed limit. And then I will talk I'll get some information, or if Randy wants to pull it or whatever, on board committees. I will recommend to Andrea, something like maybe keeping a satellite, what that would involve. Maybe we can get some funds for it. Some kind of satellite here, or offer the community room if they want to do presentations to the township residents. And what else am I going to do?
That's about it.
That's about it. And then I'll talk to the 2 TAC, our representatives. I'll call Andrea and see if she wants to be a part of that meeting, or maybe she'd just as soon not.
I would suggest just
But I'd
you
like
and the two reps at this point in time. That do so.
Okay, that's fine. I can try to get
Have
them
them come
together.
down if they can come down.
I think that's it.
I don't like to eliminate the speed limit. That eliminates my only job.
Hey, then you'll be free to go to the library.
We're gonna put you in the
How about
library.
that?
I'm voting no, eliminating that, see? Well, I was there once at the TAC meeting, and you heard what I said when I got through.
I was so glad I had corroboration. It was a waste of time. Any questions for me?
No.
Anything else? Okay,
Are we supposed to fill these things out here?
No, I gave you some lines, just in case you wanted to make some notes. Keep that and I'll let you know how it's gonna change. Any public comment, Mike?
Hey, turn the microphone on, Mike. I had to shut it off. It was staticky.
You have 3 minutes.
Is that all I get is 3 minutes? Turn it on. It's off right now. All the way up. Just take it off.
Yeah. It's not an easy button. Yeah. Well, as long as John can.
Volunteers. Lynn, you mentioned yourself, we don't have a lot of volunteers in the township. And I'm a volunteer for more than just this township. I'm on the North Country Trail Hikers. I volunteer with them. I volunteer up in Big Bay Pathway. That's part of No Cayman on Trail Network. And I'm also on the Iron Range Roll Task Force. And one of the things that I learned about being a volunteer, and the thing that keeps me motivated, is being able to accomplish stuff and being able to see what your efforts and your time has brought to the success or something that brought an event or brings amenities or facilities for people to use and enjoy. It's hard to keep volunteers interested. We're having a bigger time, a more difficult time with newer generations. All these volunteer things that I go to, except for the 40 below one, is most of us have gray hair. We're senior citizens. We're not getting the young people involved, and I don't know how to do that. But even with the Iron Range Roll, we had people, 40 below members that dropped out the last minute, day before, where they're supposed to be attending some particular crossing and be part of something. I ended up having to go on, after I rode the race, I did sweep, so I didn't go fast. But the two guys that were supposed to pick up the trash and come down and pull all the signs, they didn't show up, couldn't do it. So I ended up going up there with, so it's real hard with volunteers. And so whatever you do, try to be careful with volunteers. One of the things, this disbanding and reopening a committee based on whatever projects you may have at the time, there's a lot to be said for institutional knowledge and just the fact that you've read the rec plan and you know what the goals and the objectives are on the rec plan, or the road facilities of transportation plan, or the master plan. So that's basically, at least for me as a chair of the rec committee, my guide has been that rec plan. And I attend most of the board meetings. And we certainly, Mr. Wiegand and I spend quite a bit of time writing those minutes. I mean, it'd be nice if staff did that, but they don't have the time to do that. So we write those minutes, and we hope that that helps keep the board informed. And I'm here, I try to be here, and especially if you have questions, and let me know you want me to be here. I'd be glad to come and answer any questions about the rec committee or, and the planning commission. So, another example, Mr. Wiegand and I helped put that children's structure together. And we were over there this week trying to figure out where this swing set's gonna go. It's quite large. And it took us, we were there three hours or so. And we had to reorient it once we figured out we had to take apart part of the children's structure to put the new structure in, and we're gonna move parts of that. But those are volunteers. Those are people that are on one of your committees that realize that there's a need, and certainly we're fortunate we have a former contractor that knows what he's doing. That's not me. But, so just this whole thing, we have a hard time sometimes getting a quorum. For example, road committee the other night, Fortunately, Pete LaRue could be there on the telephone, otherwise we would not have quorum. Same thing with the rec committee. You know, it's very seldom I have all 5 people there. So your committees are doing a lot with just a few people. And whatever you can do to encourage more people to get involved is a good thing. Somehow, when you talk about dissolving stuff, and I know it's nothing against any of the committees, but when you start talking about dissolving stuff, it makes, at least I take it personally as, we're not doing our job. There's something we're not doing right. Because obviously you're not happy. Otherwise you'd say, hey, if it's not broke, let's not fix it. But I understand you're doing policy governance, and I'm open to change. I'm open to learning new things and figure out how it's going to work better for the community. Just be careful. That's all I ask you to do, because you want to keep what you have, and you want to try to encourage more people to come. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.
Shut that off again.
If I hadn't, we have a new events, and I shouldn't say new, she's been on a year now. It was one of my former employees on the events committee. And as young as she is, and as capable as she is, it took me probably a year to convince her to be a volunteer. Not because she didn't want to or didn't have the time, but you have to, what's the word? Not massage, but you have to cultivate, is the word I was looking for. That kind of a relationship, especially with the younger kids, and try to figure out why it's important to them and how it fits into their schedule. And it was difficult to encourage her only because she's got a life like anybody else. You know, they don't have any kids in the house yet, but if she were a young married woman, those people don't have time to do anything. They're going to soccer games, they got PTA, or they're taking them to the gym or whatever they're doing. And those are really the people that are, if they can manage their homes effectively, those are the kind of people we'd like to have volunteer, because they're good at it, you know. But getting them, that's hard. And I mean, that's why there's, except for Randy, older people on boards, because they're retired usually, or they're not working full-time, and they have the time to do that. So that was what I said before. If we've got people who are willing to contribute their time, let's make sure they're used effectively. I want to make sure, my other note that I had on my desk was making sure we recognize these people. Time, you do an excellent job of that with your PowerPoints and your pictures, but we need to, acknowledge them with certificates or whatever. We need to get them in here and thank them publicly so that the public can see what they're doing and how effective it is and how it helps them. So if it came across that I was trying to be negative against volunteers, absolutely not. I'm in the organizing administrative mindset here of how to make sure it's efficient. That's all I want to do. And if we have stuff on here that we're not going to need, let's get rid of it. So that's my only 2 cents. Anybody else? Comments?
I think Mr. Springer is simply saying he knows none of us have any of those visions of eliminating anything that needs to be continued. He's simply asking that we use as much discretion as possible as we advance any revisions that we make. That's all he's doing. And I think that's all right. I don't have any problem with that. And I don't think anyone else does. We have got in this township, even though we don't have as many volunteers as we'd like, we've got a great staff, and we've got volunteers that do an overwhelming job. And you're right, we need to be careful about how we treat any revision, and we will be. and you'll be there to remind us. That's okay.
Well, you know what I was thinking? You know, there's no reason you guys have to put those swing sets, that kind of stuff up by yourself. You know, if you let us know ahead of time and just send us an email and say, we're gonna be working at the park. I don't know that I can always get there, but even if the public, you know, somebody might have an hour they wanna come and help.
Just to update you on that, the Rotary Club wants to put that together. But there is a lot of preparation. You can't just go put it up. There's a lot of preparation that has to be done before they can put it up. You have to figure out where it's going to fit. Because they have fall zones and all that stuff. There's a requirement for ADA that it has to be there. And it's a very big structure. And we are going to have to move some things on the existing kiddie park. It's not going to change it. We just have to move some things from some different areas so we can get the room we need. Otherwise, this swing set is going to be between the kiddie park and the ball field, which we don't want to spread it out that far. We want to keep it all together. But there are some things that need to be done over there, and I know Randy was doing the best he could putting it all together, but sooner or later somebody's got to go over there and drive some stakes in the ground. Otherwise, the Rotary will show up, and it's hard to say where it's going to end up because you don't have any control over it. But they need to have the footings marked out, and they need to clean the ground out where it's going, and that's what we do.
Yeah,
We're not putting anything up. We're not putting anything together. We're gonna move a couple slides on Monday at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Which is going to require a piece of equipment, which I'll find someplace, but we have to move a few pieces of equipment that are fastened to the kiddie park, and we have to resituate them so that we've got room to accommodate the fall zones that have to be there. So that's what we're going to do Monday at 9 o'clock, and that gets it ready for the Rotary to come in. And
When are they gonna do that? Or
I have
they
no idea
decided?
because we Oberstar has not got the ground cleared out yet. We're kind of waiting for that, and we're hoping it'll be done by Monday, because we need to drive some stakes to show them where the footings are going for the swing set. And I don't think Rotary knows exactly all that's involved in it, because there are 8 footings that have to be dug about 18 inches in diameter and about 2 feet deep.
Bye.
And then there's some concrete involved. So I just don't think they've quite got a grasp on what's involved there, but we'll see. We'll drive where the stakes are going. We'll put stakes in, and just a matter of making sure that they're willing to work with it. And the thing, I think they're looking for the photo opportunity that they're putting it together, but as I read through the installation guidelines, you actually have to dig the footings and not pour concrete in it and assemble the swing set and have it standing in the footing holes and then pour the concrete around the swing set. Yeah, that's the actual sequence that has to happen. So it's not a matter of putting the swing set up and then spreading out wood chips and you're done. You can't do that. So, and I don't think they quite understand that yet.
They're looking at it like swing set in the back of your backyard.
Yeah, we're going to show up in the afternoon, put a swing set in, put wood chips around, boom, we're done. And it's just, it can't happen that way. But you do what you have to do. I mean,
Move to adjourn.
so 9 o'clock, Ernie, Monday.
It's 40.
Since you don't have the safety meeting, you'll have time.
Speed limit meeting,
Well, with that too.
9 o'clock Monday.
You don't even need to adjourn.
You wrote
because
it
it's a
down.
work session.
I wrote it
Well,
down.
just so John knows.
Yeah, 6:42. There's your cranker there.